Mr. Suranjan Banerjee, Associate Director, Retirement, Wills Towers Watson, Mr. Mono Fukon, General Manager, PFRDA, and Madam Baharos Kamdin, Partner, Deloitte Haskins and Sales. This is our next edition of the on a webinar on National Pension System for Corporates. And NPS is making strides across the country, and we would like to hear it from the experts. First, I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Bisharu Basu, CMA and President, Institute of Cost Accountants of India, to deliver the welcome address. But over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon to all of you. Respected Sri Supratim Bandyopadhyay, Chairman, PFRDA. Respected Mr. Suranjan Banerjee, Associate Director, Retirement, Wills Towers Watson. Respected CA Mono Fukon, General Manager, PFRDA. Respected Mr. Kamdin, Partner, Deloitte Haskins and Sales LLP. Our honorable distinguished guest, ladies and gentlemen, my professional brothers and sisters. Friends, it is my proud privilege to be present here today, and also I heartily welcome you all at this important conference organized jointly by the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. Friends, retirement planning is very crucial for every individual. The moment you start earning, you should start planning for your retirement. Whether one works in the private sector or the government one, retirement planning is one thing that both will have to do at one point. And the sooner one starts to plan for retirement and put the plan into action, the better position they are to move stress-free into retirement. COVID-19 outbreak has created unprecedented economic disruption across the globe. While the COVID-19 pandemic is primarily a public health crisis, it has disrupted business activities worldwide. The pandemic created significant turmoil on financial markets. Combined with the current uncertain economic climate, pension plan funding is under severe pressure. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on employees' retirement plans. The plan is most acute for those who have lost their jobs and no longer have access to retirement plans. The worsening economic situation means that many employees may be forced to tap into their retirement savings to stay afloat. And while that may provide access to funds now, it could come back to hurt them in their golden years. The current crisis has impacted the pension schemes through a number of channels. The extent to which pension schemes can accommodate these ranks will vary across pension schemes. Public pension plans also vary in their ability to absorb and recover from different types of shocks. Well-funded plans rely heavily on investment returns, while poorly funded plans rely much more heavily on contributions to maintain or to improve their financial condition. The pandemic showed how at risk retirement funds are as financially strapped retirement plan participants withdraw money from pension plans to pay their bills. Employees who could earn good salaries but have limited savings also borrowed from their plans. In these unpredictable times, it is critical to stay ahead of undesired financial surprises, especially while investing in a retirement benefit plan. The investment strategy of a pension plan needs to be carefully reviewed to ensure proper financing of current and future liabilities. In addition, organizing your pension benefits can decrease the employer's financial exposure. Especially companies with defined benefit plans need to analyze the financial impact of COVID-19 pandemic and take necessary steps to mitigate funding risks. Companies that proactively defend their pension plan asset allocation will undoubtedly take an important step in safeguarding the future of both their organization and their employees. As such, the current situation demands a very careful and well-informed approach in financial learning. A well-planned retirement benefit structure is critical for maintaining employee morale, especially during these difficult times. Today, we look forward to listening to our eminent speakers from PFRDA, Deloitte Haskins and Sells LLP on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on retirement planning and how to overcome this this difficult situation post-pandemic. I congratulate the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority for joining this webinar. With these few words, I put a full stop here. I pray to God for your health, happiness and prosperity. I wish this virtual seminar a grand success. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bandyopadhyay to deliver his address.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. President of Institute of Cost Accountants of India, Mr. Ghosh, and other senior officials from ICC. And once again, thanks to ICC for providing this platform where we are joining together to create awareness about NPS and pension in general. And I believe this is the fourth or fifth session together that we are arranging. And in the long run, it will go a long way in creating awareness and telling people that yes, pension is necessary. Since we are meeting for the first time in the new year 2021, my heartiest New Year wishes to everybody. Let 2021 be the year when we can see the turnaround in the economy and in lives of everybody. I want to thank Madam Behrouz Kamdeen and Suranjan Banerjee for joining us because they will be giving perspective. Madam Kamdeen will be talking about the taxation aspects in detail, and Suranjan will be talking about the retirement planning as they see, because they give a lot of assistance to corporates and their opinions to corporates. So from that point of view, they can give their perspective as to how they see retirement planning coming up in India. So when I start, let me talk about certain things about the demography, and there are certain things happening, whether we accept it or not, these are going to happen in near future. First point is growth in population. If you look at it, the way our population is growing, we are going to beat China and become the most populous country in the world by 2027, unless something very important happens and the population growth comes down or takes a nosedive, which does not seem possible at this point of time. So we are going to become the most populous country. And it's just about another 6 years, we'll see that. Second important thing is that not only the population is growing, it is aging also. So much so, today, almost 1 person in 10, they are above 60 years of age. This situation is going to change drastically in another 30 years' time. 2050, it will be 1 in 5 who will be more than 60 years of age. Longevity risk, yes, medical advancement has seen to it that people are living for much, much longer. At the age of 60 in India, average person is living for another 17 to 18 years. These are facts. So with longevity, the biggest challenge which is coming is that there is always the risk of outliving the corpus that we have built for meeting our retirement needs, our day-to-day expenses. So there is every possibility, unless we have enough corpus, we are going to outlive that. Question is, how prepared are we? Are we really prepared? Again, look at some of the statistics. Apart from organized sector, the concept of pension is not much in vogue in India today. Yes, there are targeted pension schemes for below poverty line people. We have Indira Gandhi National Old Age Pension Scheme, certain schemes which are targeted to widows and different classes of people who are needy. But if you leave that aside, there is technically nothing for unorganized sector, and which constitutes almost, the unorganized sector constitutes almost 90% of our working population. Only 10% of us who are in the organized sector and who have some kind of a coverage, whether it was the erstwhile old pension scheme, which is of course withdrawn with effect from 2004 January, or it is defined contribution kind of a scheme. We have a pension sector, yes, but it is very, very fragmented. It is not a single regulatory body or single kind of pension plans. We have pension sector which comprises NPS that we manage, NPS and APY, National Pension System and Atal Pension Yojana. Apart from that, there are superannuation funds managed by insurance companies under the umbrella of IRDAI, Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India. There are many superannuation funds. Nobody knows how many and what kind of fund they manage, because they are approved superannuation funds. They have taken approval from the local income tax office, income tax commissioner, but thereafter they manage it by themselves, self-managed superannuation funds. The data is not available at any point of time. Then obviously there is EPFO, it has a EPS part. There is coal miners and other statutory provident funds targeting different sectors like Assam tea plantation and all that. If you take all these things together, the latest data that we have, it says that 14% is the ratio of total pension assets to the GDP of India. Our total pension assets to GDP, that ratio is only 14%. Consider some countries like UK, Netherlands, and certain other countries, Switzerland, they have more than 100% of their GDP in terms of pension assets alone. Even a big country like US, they have almost, their pension assets to GDP ratio is 80%. So there also we have a lot of catching up to do. Mr. Das has talked about, Mr. Basu has talked about this pandemic and how it has affected our life. Very truly, it has affected our life. A lot of people lost their jobs. People saw their salary being curtailed over a period of time, which nobody expected before the pandemic came. So maybe as a result of that, people has realized that there is a reason for creating a corpus post their retirement so that their basic needs can be taken care of. Because during this period, what we have really seen is that there is a growth in even NPS also. Initial stage, we thought that there are very strict lockdowns, people will not go out, how they will onboard, how they will come and open their accounts. But the entire team in PFRDA worked together to ensure that online onboarding processes are made easy, KYC processes are made easy. So lots of people have joined during this period also. As per the latest data, which is available up to 23rd January, I'm very happy to tell you that we have currently almost 40 million customers. 40 million customers, both from NPS and APY sector. And out of that, almost 16 million is from NPS and a little over 26 million is from APY. APY is a product which is normally targeted to unorganized sector because it is a guaranteed sort of pension, a guaranteed pension which has a defined contribution. So it gives best of both worlds, but only it is targeted to the group of people who are in the age bracket of 18 to 40, and you can get a maximum pension of guaranteed pension of 5,000. And government is standing by as the guarantor. Whereas NPS is basically a defined contribution scheme, and it is a market-driven scheme. So here one has to take care of the market ups and downs, but all taken together, the kind of returns that we have generated, there will be a presentation by Mr. Mono Fukon at a later point. There you can see. But I can tell you over last 11 to 12 years, most of the funds are giving more than 10 to 10.5% kind of a CAGR, which I believe under the circumstances are looking at the fact that we are taking safety as the first priority. This is really commendable. The total customer base during this period, even due to pandemic, after pandemic effects also, has gone up by almost 17%. Whereas the total asset base, which was 4,17,000 crore when we started the year in April 2020, now it has gone up to almost 5,58,000 crore, which is showing almost a growth of 34%. So in both the accounts, we have seen maybe more and more customers, new customers coming, joining. Maybe they are increasing their contribution also. Because NPS is a scheme which is very, very flexible. So much so, if somebody wants to open an account, they can manage it by even paying 1,000 rupees a year in the worst case scenario. But somehow we see that there is a huge disconnect between the kind of returns we are giving, the benefits we are giving, and the intention of people to come and join. Why this is so? Maybe there are many challenges. Two things that comes to mind and boils down to that is maybe the ability of the person or the awareness level of the person. But if you ask me, I believe awareness is much, much about the ability. Because if somebody is aware, he or she will know by paying 1,000 rupees a year, that is less than 3 rupees a day, I can really continue with my pension account even during the most difficult phase of my life. You don't have to close it. You don't have to withdraw your money. By paying that small amount, you can carry on with your pension account. When good days come back, we are having extra cash flow, you deposit any kind of money you can, which is obviously supported by your kind of income. There is no limit, upper limit on the contribution. It has got a lot of tax benefits. Madam Behrouz will be talking about that, but I can tell you that at the point of entry, at the point of contribution, you have tax benefit. Yes, certain limits are there. At the point of accumulation, you have full tax benefit. Whatever it is accumulated to, it is tax-free. And at the point of withdrawal, you can withdraw 60% when somebody is going out, either reaching the age of 60 or superannuating. 60% of the corpus can be withdrawn. That is also tax-free. So it's if you look at it from every side, it is a win-win kind of a product. But only thing is that that awareness somehow is not going into the mind of the younger generation, because as Mr. Basu has rightly pointed out, people have to start early, because then you get the benefit of the eighth wonder in the world, as they call it, the compounding effect. And if somebody starts even 5 to 7 years earlier than another person and start contributing the same amount with the same kind of returns, the ultimate result that is totally different. So people have to definitely start early. They have to understand, yes, this is what we need. Today, I believe we'll be talking about mostly corporate customers, because a lot of corporate customers, they might have come. Their HR people also might have come. More than 8,100 corporates have already joined our fold. But the interesting part is the total number of subscribers under corporate is hardly about 11 lakh, not even that. So that shows the take-up ratio. Means people are joining, maybe 2% of the total forces, workforce is joining, not the entire amount, or not maybe 30-40%, which is the normal expectation. That is not, those people are not joining. Some of the CPSCs, they have come forward, Central Public Sector Enterprises. 45 CPSCs of big, medium, and small size, they have already shifted their entire workforce to NPS. That was a big gain for us. They have seen that it is tax efficient, it gives a better return, so they have shifted. And some 5-6 CPSCs are in pipeline. They are also thinking of shifting to us. But so far as other corporates are concerned, where it is more of a voluntary nature, I believe the corporate leaders, the HR heads, and other people, they have a big, big role to play. And you have to maybe guide those people. You have to maybe play the role of a mentor and tell them what are the benefits like. And if anything we have seen comes from the corporate team, the HR head, it is accepted without any question. So I believe you have a big, big role to play. Because all these people, if they don't have enough corpus at a later point of time, somehow they are going to be a burden on the society, today or tomorrow. So we have, I believe, a big role to play. And these kind of seminars will go a long way, I believe, in creating that awareness. Today, after the session is over, definitely we'll have question and answer. So to the best of our ability, whether it is us from PFRDA or Suranjan as an actuary or Madam Tanvi as a tax expert, we'll try to answer all your questions. So thank you once again, ICC, for arranging this session, and I believe we'll continue to have these kind of webinars again and again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One thing I would like to inform you, way back in 2004, I had written an article, Aging an Indian Society, published abroad. I think time has come for me to revise, send a revised version of that article to you. Anyhow, now I would like to invite Mr. Suranjan Banerjee, Associate Director, to deliver his content. Cool.
Yeah, hi, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are very much audible, sir.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't find the screen. And also, can I just check that my slides are up?
Yeah, you just go through its visual and do in the maximum mode, sir.
Yes, yes. Now I'll just do that. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Great. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Basu, Mr. Ghosh, and a very good afternoon to everyone on the webcast today. Firstly, apologies for the slight delay. I was just having some teething issues getting the screen up, but now it's all there. Also, I think it's always a great pleasure and a privilege to be speaking at one of these events, and to, of course, share the virtual panel with such distinguished individuals. I would like to thank the Indian Chamber of Commerce as well as the PFRDA for giving us these opportunities on an ongoing basis. Okay, right. So today I'll be speaking to you about retirement benefits planning, and my approach to this would be to present to you some results from a few surveys that we have done over the last sort of 12 months or so. And now, whilst these surveys don't specifically focus on COVID-19, I think we should remember that quite a few of the interim relief measures, which have already been exhausted, and therefore individuals should consider thinking beyond the pandemic in order to get the right level of savings for a sustainable retirement. And as Mr. Chairman rightly pointed out, if anything, this has to be done with maybe more rigor than before, because unfortunately, like you said, sir, I think a few of us may have lost some ground, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. So what are these surveys about? The first survey pertains to how the corporate sector employees are feeling about their own retirement benefit savings. So basically hearing from the horse's mouth. And this survey basically where we don't actually go to our clients who are the corporates, but actually the employees of those clients. And we interviewed several thousand individuals across several countries around a wide variety of topics, in particular related to their current financial situation, which included, as you can imagine, a fairly substantial section on retirement benefits. I'll be sharing some key thoughts and highlights with you, which I feel are relevant towards the Indian context. For the second survey, the respondents include more than 160 private sector companies across various industries in India, such as pharma, FMCG, manufacturing, IT, telecom, etc. And what we believe is that the two surveys, when considered together, present two sides of pretty much the same coin, and where we can see how employees perceive the retirement benefits, as well as how the employer, who in a lot of cases is the primary, if not the sole sponsor or facilitator of such benefits, is actually viewing these very same instruments. Okay, so let me dive right in. Now, I thought before I get into the Indian context, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you pointed out, countries having sort of higher percentage in retirement assets as a percentage of GDP. So what I thought it'd be quickly good to get is, not just themes in India, but actually what is happening elsewhere. Now, some of the key things with retirement, I'll just put up on screen. Right. So we find that there's been a definite erosion of the retirement provision, and so I think you mentioned it's a very simple example. We don't need to look much further from home. Is that the defined benefit pension plans, especially for the government sector, which have now fallen away because, to be honest, just the cost of running those and sponsoring those is just way too high, and therefore we've moved to what we call defined contribution plans, which basically limit the liability or the obligation that an employer may have. In this case, that might be the government themselves, but to make them more sustainable, fit for use, and also to be able to then empower the employees or the end users to have a bit more skin in the game, to basically think about these provisions a bit more, because some of the risks or some of the key risks, such as investment returns, are actually being transferred over from the sponsor or to the employees themselves. And I think that sort of covers the second point I have on screen, is that it just basically puts the ball more in the court of individuals, basically, who could have previously said, oh, I don't really need to think about this. I have got my plan. When I retire, I will get 50% of my last drawn pay. But hang on, this changes the landscape and makes them sort of take those decisions, right? Even when you look at NPS, there's so many flexibilities and opportunities and options that can be tweaked based on individual preferences, which I'm sure Mono will cover later in his slides. And finally, individuals approaching retirement ages, we found that they're servicing larger amounts of debt with a smaller proportion of housing wealth. Now, this is basically two issues here. One is that given they're servicing more and more debt, could be education loans, could be other loans that they may have taken, they're able to save less for retirement. And the other issue that we find is that they seem to have a lower proportion of them seem to have any access to let's say their own housing, which means they also might have the burden of rents, which which may not actually serve them well as they come up to retirement. Okay, and then now making this a bit more specific towards India, just some more stats on the screen. So we found that 30% feel they're not heading in the right direction in relation to their financial position. This would include various aspects such as access to emergency funds, long-term savings to meet key financial goals, retirement savings, debt management, etc. 30% also feel that they're not heading in the right direction, specifically in relation to their retirement savings. So not just the other piece, but more specifically to say that, look, I probably don't think I have enough for retiring. Also, a very large number, 60%, felt that they're not saving enough, which links in with our broader finding, that individuals are struggling to be able to retire at ages of previous generations. So that means they're probably having to work a little bit longer because they don't actually have enough savings to be able to retire, let's say, at 60, for example. However, the good news in all of this is that more than half of these individuals have also therefore increased their allocation to retirement savings in the last couple of years. Now, it's a different issue as to what might they consider enough or appropriate, but an increase is definitely a step in the right direction. And these could, but not be limited to, let's say, doing a little top up on your provident fund by doing BPF, making sure you have NPS and you maximize not just the employer's contributions towards NPS, but also your own sort of as an individual, your own contributions to NPS as well. Okay, just moving on from the previous slide. Sorry, some more numbers for you to consider. And this slide basically talks about, just if we segregate all of our respondents into sort of 3 non-overlapping buckets. If we said, okay, it's not just what people are saying, but let's demarcate them into 3 distinct bubbles. Then we would find that roughly 30% felt they're falling behind on retirement savings, and also felt that they had not taken any steps to try and address the situation. So these are people who know they're behind, but have not actually taken any steps. For example, due to other more pressing financial commitments, children's education, housing loans, etc. More than 40% felt that they were on the right track. So that is good news. At least 40% felt that they were doing enough or saving enough to make sure that they're going to be able to retire at a level which they feel comfortable with, which again could come from the fact that they had, previously inherited housing, or, they've not had enough debt in their life, or they've just been good at managing their money. And the balance 30% actually felt that whilst they weren't on track as yet, they had recognized the problem and were taking proactive steps or taking all corrective steps already to put them back on track. And like I said, these could be starting small, even if you have a, top up on your NPS plans, or trying to do a little bit on the voluntary provident fund side as well. Okay, so on this slide, I'll actually try and put some numbers and attempt to quantify, what kind of, when we say saving enough, or, in terms of how do we measure, what enough might mean. So to demonstrate this, what I'll do is rely on a very old concept called the net replacement ratio, which very simply put defines how much you're likely to have as regular income just before as regular income just before you retire, expressed in percentage terms of what you're receiving just before you retire through income from salary. Now, just to give you a very simple example, if someone retired at the salary of 1 lakh a month and received a regular pension of 50,000 rupees just after they retired, the replacement issue is basically 50 over 100, which is 50%. And basically, going by some of the examples we have from other countries, a typical replacement ratio would be in the region of about between 50 to 70%, and most countries actually target a replacement ratio of roughly 2/3, at least historically they did. Of course, with the new changes coming about, things have moved around a little bit. Okay, in my example, also just to point out, I have ignored tax, just to make sure we didn't be stuck to what I thought was the key element. But of course, I know Ms. Kamdin is going to talk about tax in a lot more detail later. Okay, so the example basically considers somebody who starts working at 23 with a basic salary of 25,000 a month. Again, I leave you to look at some of the other key assumptions I've made for these illustrations, but not to detract from the fact that this is a sample case and just an illustration. So we find that if the individual only had statutory benefits such as the Provident Fund and gratuity, and of course a very strong assumption that if they used all the lump sum they get to exchange for an annuity income, they would be able to achieve a replacement ratio of about 34%, or let's say about 1/3, which, as you notice, sort of falls below the threshold we would want. Adding access to a legacy superannuation fund, which of course we know are less popular and less prevalent as of today, but just assume this person also had access to a superannuation fund, their replacement ratio is likely to increase to 46%, so sort of getting to that halfway mark. And also finally, if the person also added NPS to their portfolio, that would add a significant increase and take the overall replacement ratio to about 63%, which then bumps us into what we might consider sustainable or at least a good outcome. Now, these outcomes also come with the following caveats, and I think Sir actually mentioned at the start, Mr. Basu mentioned at the start, we need to start early, right? The moment you start earning, you should start thinking about retirement. Maybe unfortunately, for whatever reason, that doesn't happen as much as we would like. But in this case, we have made the assumption that this person, even at the age of 23, starts to think about savings and starts putting money away, even if it's small. As you lose years, like Mr. Bandyopadhyay said, if you lose years, it becomes very difficult to catch up, particularly because on the one hand, you can use power of compounding to your advantage. But at the other hand, if you sort of lose out or you miss out, then it kind of works against you and leaves you sort of without the financial outcomes you'd ideally want. Also, just another point here that we've all heard about the recent labor codes, the code on wages, the code on social security, and here I've just made an assumption that this is sort of basic salary. A lot of the statutory contributions that as we know in the private sector with the whole concept of basic salary, the contributions are based on basic. However, unfortunately, the median on basic salary is about 35% of total compensation. So I think we need to keep our eyes peeled, and as we get closer to an implementation date of the recent codes, we might find that the salary or the wage definition for a lot of these statutory benefits might also be impacted, probably, and in most, if not all cases, there'll be an upward correction across the corporate sector. Okay, right. So that was the view from the employees. Now, just a quick, let's flip the coin and have a look at what the employers are saying. And this is a survey that we just conducted in sort of July, August of 2020. And the survey was actually conducted when we were kind of in the middle of the pandemic, or at least some of the more sort of worse, bad months as far as the pandemic is concerned on, and its impact on business results. Okay, the first slide talks about the corporate model of the NPS. Again, the numbers are a little bit dated, so 7-8 months old, so please bear with that. But again, good news is, every time we run these surveys, we find that more and more employers have actually got NPS in place. So in this particular instance, we find that it's gone up. The companies who are already providing NPS has actually gone up from about 43% in 2019 to 51% in 2020. And as you can see, there's another 20% who are in the process of implementing or at least evaluating its implementation. And just to add a note, having personally assisted several of our own clients implement the NPS despite the lockdown, I think as Mr. Chairman mentioned, the PFRDA, the CRAs, the POPs, I think all deserve a special mention as they have all of them have come together, taken whatever steps to ensure enrollments can take place virtually. I think that's been a big win, and that's why, despite the lockdown, as Sir mentioned at the start, enrollments have actually gone up, and also with the markets rebounding, the investment performance has also been noteworthy. Okay. And until the survey was conducted, the average NPS take-up rate was reported to be around 11%. So what I mean by take-up rate is in corporates, when we provide NPS on a voluntary basis, the proportion of people who come forward and enroll themselves divided by the total per head count is kind of what we call the enrollment rate, which is a good yardstick to see how successful NPS is, or how NPS has actually penetrated through the corporate sector, because just by offering it to employees doesn't mean people are necessarily taking it up. We found that the take-up rates are very similar to 2019. And we felt that some of the reasons, actually, if you look back and deep dive, you'll find that one of the reasons might have been some of the budget changes that were made in 2020. And with the new regime bringing in the overall limit of about 7.5 lakh on total retiral contributions to employer contributions, I think we found that a few people actually just sort of took a step back and maybe said they want to wait and watch this space a little bit, and to understand, given it was the first year, they wanted to sort of understand the workings of the new tax regime, which may have deferred the choice of enrolling into NPS for those individuals. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. A couple of other trends that have emerged, especially in relation to NPS, is that we find employers are offering a lot of flexibility in terms of choosing a particular contribution level, which is good to see, with a lot of them actually letting the flexibility rest with the employees, because this is kind of their own financial decisions, and because it's placed or positioned as a voluntary plan, we're letting employees actually make those decisions for themselves. And finally, the trend that seems to be emerging is that more and more employers or corporates are willing to sort of help their employees just with some of the initial costs, just to be able to make it easier for them, and for those, costs such as enrollment, even though they're not significant, but at least mentally they'll, removing that barrier to at least help them engage with the NPS product. Right, the next slide actually shows the interest that companies have shown to enable the portability from legacy superannuation funds over to the NPS. So now I think, as you may be aware, from sort of 2017 onwards, there was a circular which said that there'll be, a one-time, one-way tax-free porting can be undertaken for individuals who want to move out of their superannuation funds and into NPS. So again, we find that, as whilst 8% have already done this, there's another 34% doing it now or considering it in the future. But there are still a large majority who are probably not considering this. And these could also be the companies who don't actually have NPS at the moment. So they might be sort of waiting to launch NPS before they actually undertake this particular activity. Okay, so in my final couple of slides, what I'll do is maybe talk to you about a little bit more on the recent, by recent, in the last sort of 12 months, regulatory developments. It's funny that we're already up to the next budget, and we still haven't fully sort of gotten our heads around some of the declarations that were made, or the announcements that were made at the last budget, particularly with the 7.5 lakh limit, and what priority order. So I'll let Ms. Kamdin maybe shed a bit more light on the taxation treatment of that across the various retirement vehicles. Right, so here we looked at employers, how they're responding to the overall limit of 7.5 lakh, and how it's impacting individuals' retirement arrangements, which includes PF, SAF, and NPS. We find that an overwhelming 84% said they had actually not taken any steps considering this change at this stage, which means that basically, as far as the compensation structure is concerned, they actually haven't done anything. And whilst a sort of a small proportion, like 7%, said they're restructuring salary, and 5% said they're looking at increasing flexibility. So these numbers would have changed over the last few months, but I feel that people are still sort of getting their heads around some of these announcements, and also now with the code on wages and the social security and the other labor codes set to make an appearance as early as April this year. A lot more people might defer any any decisions regarding their compensation structure. Finally, of course, just want to sort of leave you with the code or some highlights of the code as we see it. Of course, a lot more. There has been, a little more clarity as the months have rolled on. But still, we find that there are some aspects which need further clarifications or a more refinement of the rules as and when they come out. So just some of our recommendations here. So we know that a lot of companies will need to review their overall compensation structure and reconsider how they determine the wages that are going to be used for determining benefit contributions and payouts, such as the provident fund or gratuity contributions. And prima facie, one way of doing this could be to uplift basic salary. But again, I think we do need to go back to the code, make sure we understand the inclusions and exclusions, because just by uplifting basic salary, you may not have actually, made your salary structure compliant. So there's some work that needs to be done there for people to actually, and more clarity to be provided from the government to ensure that, companies, as and when they keep changing their structure, they are making sure they are fully compliant. Also, just to note that as gratuity liabilities will increase as the benefits, which will also increase cash flows and provisions in the books. So that is something the employers do need to watch out for. And on the other hand, where the statutory PF contributions, which are typically included in what we call a CTC concept in private sector in India, and if the CTC is to be maintained, it will then reduce the overall take-home salary of employees, because they'll put more into the provident fund, which will become a savings or deferred savings, which will reduce what they will be able to take home immediately. Despite these sort of far-reaching consequences, however, it is surprising to see that only 13% of companies, and again, I totally sort of admit that these numbers are now a little bit out of date, and that number should now have increased. But we found that even though the code on wages, for example, came out last year, and this survey was carried out in the code on wages came out in 2019, and this survey was carried out in the middle of 2020, we still find that only about 13% companies have actually sort of done anything or taken cognizance of the changes. And it's only when the other codes came out that the companies that really started to think about these things. That's all I really had to cover for today's session, and I look forward to your questions in the Q&A section. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity. With that, I'll probably pass back to Mr. Basu. Sorry, Mr. Ghosh. Mr. Ghosh, over to you.
Yes, Mr. Banerjee, thank you. A lot of interesting questions have come. People are actively participating. But right now, I would invite Mr. Mono Phukon, General Manager, PFRDA, to deliver his presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Is my slide visible?
Yes, sir. Visible.
Just to start with about NPS, with the features. The unique features of NPS is that it's an individual pension account. NPS, and under NPS you have a unique identifier, which we call as a permanent retirement account number. And the pension account is opened in the name of the individual, unlike other schemes, pension schemes, where it's a pooled account or something like that. So here, the contributions flow to that account. The account is portable across employment. Since the number is unique, it can be identified to the individual, and it can be moved from employer to employer. Only the tagging itself changes, the number remains constant. So this is something, a uniqueness in NPS regarding an individual account, and it can be identified exactly to that particular individual, and it remains constant over employments and across employments and across geographies also. The next feature that is there, it's the lowest cost pension scheme across the globe. In fact, this because of the unbundled architecture that has been set up by the regulator, wherein cost has been kept to the minimum to all the entities that are involved in the functioning of the entire system. Next, we have choices. There are various choices of a subscriber can opt for regarding the fund manager, regarding the asset class, regarding his investment choices that where the money should flow. So there are a lot of choices that the subscriber needs to exercise, which we'll be talking about in the later part of the slides. And these investments are giving returns which are comparable or which are market linked, and it is competitive, and which can be compared with the competing products, and we have been able to deliver a much better return than the other competing products that are there in the space. Tax part, a lot of things have been said about it, how it's beneficial to be in NPS, and Madam Kamdin will be covering most of the things on the tax part, how efficient the product is from the taxation point of view. Transparency and online access is that this account can be subscribed, or means after subscribing, the account holder can view his account online. He can transact online, and we have a mobile app also. He can web in and do the transactions and access the account 24/7. And lastly, it is regulated by PFRDA. In NPS, we have two types of account. The basic account is the individual pension account. As I told, it's nomenclature as a Tier 1 account in our system, and the next is the Tier 2. So Tier 1 is actually the pension account where all the tax benefits are there. There are certain restrictions on withdrawal. The minimum contribution is 500 rupees, and the minimum contribution per year is 1,000. And if there is no upper limit on the amount or in the number of contributions that a person can make into this account. The Tier 2 is an optional account. It can be opened only when you have a Tier 1 account, the basic pension account. And not much of tax benefits are there. Only some tax benefits are available to the central government employees. We don't have any restrictions on withdrawal. You can deposit it today, withdraw it tomorrow. So there are no restrictions. And the minimum amount that can be contributed is 250 rupees. And for opening the account, we only require 1,000 rupees for opening this account. For opening an NPS account, there are certain conditions. The only condition is that it should be KYC compliant, and the applicant should be aged between 18 to 65 years. And the account can be opened online or physical by filling up an application. And we have distribution points which are called points of presence, which are banks and non-banking financial institutions through which it can be opened. Accumulations can, or the contributions after opening the account, the contributions can be made by the individual himself if it is opened, and if it is opened with a tie-up with a tag to an employer or a corporate. We are flexible enough to take contributions either from the employer, and if the contributions are made by the employee and the employer, the contributions can be equal or unequal also. So we have allowed a lot of flexibility in the way the money is being contributed to the individual pension account. And the contribution directly flows to a banker, and then after that, it is being given to the fund manager or as chosen by the employee or the subscriber. So these funds are being invested by the selected or the registered fund managers, and at the end of the day, they declare a net asset value of the scheme or the asset class that the subscriber has chosen. And based on this net asset value of the scheme, units are allocated by the record keeper, which is reflected in their account at the end of the day. So the value of the funds or the contributions that are being there is being reflected in the form of a units. And the value can be arrived at by multiplying the units with the net asset value of the scheme. And as contributions are being made, the units goes on increasing in the subscriber's individual pension account. So as the corpus grows, we say that on the point of maturity, the amount can be withdrawn. So the normal exit point or the maturity age is 60 years. And on that, we call it as a normal exit, in which, in that case, 60% of the corpus that has been accumulated is being given as a lump sum, that is cash transfer to the bank account, and 40% has been utilized to purchase an annuity scheme from which the subscriber will derive a regular periodic income or a pension. And if the corpus is less than 2 lakhs, the entire amount is being given to the subscriber. And If the subscriber wishes to withdraw before his superannuation age or 60 years, we call it as a premature exit, and wherein the condition is that 80% of the corpus has to be transferred to an annuity service provider or a life insurance company for buying an annuity plan from which the pension will be derived, and only 20% will be paid as a lump sum. And if the corpus is less or equal to 1 lakh, the entire amount is paid to the subscriber. But in case of unfortunate death of the subscriber, the entire corpus can be taken by the given to the nominee. As I told you that the corpus, certain percentage, minimum 40% has to be transferred or utilized to purchase an annuity. We have empaneled 12 annuity service providers, which provides the plan annuity plans for the subscribers to choose from. And LIC, SBI, HDFC, ICICI, Star Union Dai-ichi, India First, Canada, HSBC, OBC, then Kotak, Max Life, Edelweiss Tokyo, Tata, AIA Life, and Bajaj Allianz, other empaneled insurance companies. And they offer a variety of annuity plans, which the subscriber chooses at the point of maturity. And the pension amount would vary according to the amount of corpus that has been accumulated and the percentage of corpus that has been annuitized. Though the minimum is 40%, the subscriber can annuitize 100% of his corpus also. So as I told about in the first slide that there are flexible choices and a lot of choices has to be made. We have 2 record keepers. The first choice is that, and the distribution points have tie up with this record keeper. So the level of service and the quality of service will remains the same from each of the record keepers. There's only a slight difference in the costing of this or the cost structure of these 2 record keepers. And this is being decided by the point of presence whom the distribution points that the subscriber approaches. And after that, the fund manager has to be selected. We have 7 fund managers right at the moment: SBI, LIC, UTI, ICICI, HDFC, Kotak, and Aditya Birla Sun Life. So of these 7 fund managers, a subscriber needs to choose how which fund manager will manage the contributions. And though the choices are made initially by the subscriber, it can be changed every once in a year. So we have allowed that flexibility also. A subscriber choosing any of the fund managers can opt to change the fund manager as and when he wishes, but that condition remains that it can be done once in a year. Next is the asset allocation, how the contributions will be distributed or invested into the 3 or 4 asset classes. So the subscriber can make the choices actively, deciding on how the contributions will be segregated and invested in the different asset classes. So equity, we permit maximum of 75% of the contributions can be invested in equity. In corporate bonds, 100% is allowed, government securities 100%, and alternate assets we allow only 5%. So the entire corpus can be put into government bonds also, government corporate bonds also. And if a subscriber chooses equity, he can choose up to a maximum of only 75%, 25% has to go into debt. And this choice also doesn't remain constant. It can be changed twice in a year. If a subscriber doesn't want to do an active choice or an active allocation of the contributions between the 4 asset classes that we have, he can go in for an he or she can go in for an auto choice, which is a life cycle fund basically, wherein it's a predetermined ratio or a proportion of the contributions being flowing into equity, corporate bonds, and government securities. So we have a life cycle 75, where it's nothing but an equity exposure of 75%. Life cycle 50, which is a moderate life cycle where we have a nomenclature that's 50% of equity, and a conservative life cycle fund, LC 25, wherein equity exposure is 25%, corporate bond is 45%, and government security is 30%. So what happens is that up to an age of 35, this proportion remains constant. And upon crossing the age of 35, the portfolio gets rebalanced, or the allocations in between these 3 asset classes gets automatically rebalanced every year. So in the aggressive fund, it reduces by 4%, and simultaneously the debt proportion increases. And in the conservative one, it decreases by almost 1%. So what happens is that at the age of 55, the aggressive fund, which has an exposure of 75%, will have an exposure of 15%, The moderate one will have an equity exposure of 10%, and the conservative one will have an equity exposure of 5%. So as gradually from 35 years to 55 years, the proportion of equity goes on decreasing over a period of every year. As told about returns, which NPS has been, fund managers have been able to deliver competitive returns in comparable to other investment products. Equity over the last 11 years have been able to deliver almost nearing about 12%. Corporate bond 10.23%, government securities 10%, 10.09%. Central government funds and state government funds, which are more of a mixed portfolio wherein equity exposure is only 15%, and corporate bond is around 30%, and government securities are around 50%. So in that portfolio also, the returns that have been generated over the last 10-11 years is more than 10%. This is all returns are in average returns of fund managers, and which are the compounded annual growth rate returns. The number of subscribers as on date was 23rd January, that was around 4 crore subscribers we have. So almost 77 lakh subscribers are in the government sector. And in the non-government sector, we have around 26 lakhs of subscribers, and remaining 3 crores of subscribers in the government-sponsored schemes. The corpus, as we have said, it is around 5,60,000 crores, wherein 4,60,000 crores belongs to government, and the non-government is only 1 lakh crores, of which corporate is around 59,000, and unorganized sector, the individuals who have joined voluntarily the scheme, is around 20,000 crores. Regarding accessibility, as I've told you, we have a mobile app. After opening that account, a subscriber can have access to his account through the online mode also, where we provide a login ID. And the login ID also can be created online, because we have through an OTP-based authentication to the mobile number. So 24/7, having internet access, he can log into his account and do transactions. He can do withdrawals. He can change his personal details also. Apart from that, the mobile app is also there, which becomes handy nowadays to view on the go. So we have made available that access through the electronic mode. And lastly, just like to highlight about the grievance mechanism that has been set up by the regulator. We have a centralized grievance redressal mechanism, wherein there's an escalation matrix. If any subscriber is aggrieved of the services, he can represent it, or he can put in writing, or through a mail, or in a physical call. So against the intermediary whom which he has a grievance. So if that is unresolved, it goes to the National Pension System Trust. And then the next escalation, if it's not satisfied with the resolution being provided, it then goes to Ombudsman. Then it comes to the regulator. And apart from that, after that, if it's not satisfied with the regulator, it can go up to the Securities Appellate Tribunal. So this is the entire matrix of redressing any grievances that arises in the system. And the subscriber is being assured that he is being the grievances or the problems that he has in his system are being resolved to his satisfaction. With this, I'd like to thank you, all of you, and would like to hand over to Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to invite Madam Baharoz Kamdin to deliver her thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Thank you, Mr. Bandyopadhyay, Chairman PFRD, giving us this opportunity. And thank you, Mr. Basu, for the introduction, and Mr. Banerjee and Mono for taking us to the importance of retirement planning and the features of NPS. Milind, can you please put up the slides? So as Milind puts up the slides, basically, I think NPS has a very good features around it. And I think that's something which is not known to most people. So one basic feature which is very good of NPS, and which I think it's very nice, was portability. When I was working earlier, some 30 years back, and I worked in an organization for 8 years. And in that organization, the pension fund, you were entitled to it only once you complete 10 years of working. So since I did not work for the balance 2 years, all the contribution which was made till 8 years was lost. So I did not get the amount. And if it was NPS at that point of time, I could have ported that NPS into another wherever I'm joining or wherever I'm continuing. And it doesn't have to be linked to the employer. So it doesn't get lost. All my contributions would have been there with me, which is a very unique feature of NPS. The second unique feature of NPS, which I thought was good, is as compared to, and we heard a lot of speakers say that you have something as a defined contribution plan and a defined benefit plan. And for us to understand what is defined contribution plan and defined benefit plan, every individual should know of it. So when earlier in the olden days, we had this concept of a defined benefit plan. So when I retire, I'll get 10,000 rupees of pension. It's a big amount at that point of time. In those years, it used to be a very nice amount. But if you look at it later, 10 years later, 20 years later, is 10,000 really worth it? And then this concept came of defined contribution plan. So of course, it has a pros and cons of both. At least I get a sure 10,000 rupees, which I'm getting, as compared to a defined contribution plan, which could give me something lower than that. But in defined contribution plan, and that too in the NPS defined contribution plan, when I withdraw, what gets fixed is 40% of that amount. 60% of the amount is withdrawable. So I can invest 60% in other securities, other investment avenues, and get a good return. And 40% is all that I have to take an annuity, which will give me my annuities for the pension for life. So in that sense, it's a combination of a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan. So the good features of both the plans are being taken in NPS. And I think that's key for an NPS to succeed. So now when we come to tax, all the speakers have spoken on it. And whenever we look at investment, we always look at the return on investment. And when we look at return on investment, we see what is my tax, net of tax return on investment. Because tax is a component, every individual has to pay tax. And tax is important because it's different for different individuals. I could be in a lower bracket of tax slab, I could be in the highest bracket. So depending on which bracket you are and what benefits you want to take, the tax rate changes. And therefore, the net of tax return is very essential. So today we are going to be discussing basically to say that what are my tax incentives of investment in NPS? What are changes that the Finance Act has done? And earlier speakers have spoken about it. We will discuss in a little more depth, but we still await clarity on that. And then are there any reliefs for COVID-19 which the government has provided? Next slide. So when we look at incentives, tax incentives of retirement planning, because it's long term, it's over a period of 20 to 30 years that we are investing. We look at the entire life cycle of it. So when the employer makes a contribution, is it taxable for the employee or it's not taxable for the employee? That's the first thing that we have to look at when you look at retirement planning. The second is, will the employer get a deduction for the contribution that it's making? So those two things are very key from a tax perspective to know what my return on investment is. Then the employee contribution. When an employee contributes, is government giving incentive to say that you can claim that as a deduction while you compute a total income? See, in the earlier years, we had a practice where we did not have any government schemes for general public. And therefore, government used to incentivize savings. And the incentivized savings used to be by way of a tax benefit. So they used to say that whatever contribution an employee makes, you could claim a deduction for that from the total income and your tax benefit there immediately. Nowadays, the government have actually started looking at to say that, do I need to incentivize savings or should the tax rates be reduced? So the government has come out with another scheme, a lower rate of tax, and that's an option for the employee to choose. So an individual can choose whether he wants to go on the normal rates of taxes and claim deductions, or does the employee want to go for lower rate of tax and not claim any deductions? There are a few cases of individuals, and especially in the lower rate of taxation, lower slab rates of income, who don't have that much amount to save because of the cost of inflation, cost of everything that is there today. It's so high, so people are not able to save. So then the government is saying that those who cannot save, you come under lower rate of tax. So you're not forced to save just to take back tax benefits. So what are the tax incentives of contribution for the employee? Then the annual accrual, it's a 20 period which is there for retirement, 20, 30 years, maybe in some cases 40 years. And if I'm accruing every year an income on that contribution which I'm making, what tax impact of that? Is it taxable, not taxable? Has to be looked into when I'm making the investments. And then of course on withdrawal. So when I'm retiring, is the withdrawal amount taxable or not? And that we need to look at all retirement plannings. So like Mr. Banerjee mentioned that PF and gratuity will not be sufficient. So I have to look at other avenues of savings, like my mutual funds, like equity shares, like NPS, like superannuation funds, PPF. All of those avenues have to be looked at and then discussed and seen what are my benefits for it. So we now discuss on the specific benefits of investing in NPS. Next slide, please. So when we discuss first is the deduction for employees' contribution to the NPS account. Now, when an employee contributes, so here they have actually made a distinction between employee contribution and an individual contributing. And this is very unique to an NPS. See, earlier when we used to be employees, we were covered by our employer schemes, either superannuation or a provident fund. But here is a case when NPS, I can contribute as an employee, or if I'm not an employee, like we are professionals and we are not employees. So in case of professionals, what do? We can still contribute and get a deduction for it. So the deduction allowed under section 80CCD, and it says that 20% of the gross income in case of non-employee, like self-employed taxpayers or any individuals, you get 20% of the gross income. And in case of employees, it's 10% of the salary plus DA, which is allowed as a deduction. So there's a limit which has been fixed within 80CCD to get as a deduction. And this limit, there's an overall limit above this to say that this deduction will be restricted to 1,50,000. So it is clubbed along with my 80C deductions. So whatever I put in recognized provident fund or an LIC premium, or I have a PPF account or any other deductions which are there, 80C, 80CCC, 80CCD1, all of this, the aggregate deduction which I get is 1,50,000. So it comes within my aggregate deduction. I don't get anything further than that. However, in NPS, we have this unique thing to say that over and above that, I get a 50,000 deduction, which is only allowed for an NPS account. So if I've already exhausted my limit of 1,50,000 and I've contributed 50,000 to an NPS account, I still get that 50,000 as a benefit. And that's allowed under 80CCD 1B. So I get an additional benefit by contributing to NPS 50,000 rupees. So if I'm on the highest tax slab rate, say 35%, approximately 30% plus surcharge and cess, I will get benefit immediately of around 18,000, 18,000 rupees. So my net of tax investment has happened is around just 35,000 or 36,000. So on that, my return has to be looked at. So I'm getting a tax advantage immediately when I make contribution of up to 50,000 rupees in an NPS account. Now, this deductions, if you go for lower rate of tax, not allowed. So if you offer a lower rate of taxation, which is there, which is in line from the current year, you cannot get a deduction under 80CCD, which is the same for any other deductions. Under 80C also you don't get, 80CCD also you don't get. Now we come to the contribution made by employer to the fund. Now when the employer makes a contribution, the entire contribution is taxable as salary. So the entire employer's contribution gets taxed in the first place as salary for the employee. However, they have said that whatever contribution employer makes, you can claim a deduction for it, 80CCD2. But the deduction has got restrictions. It says that in case of employees, it cannot exceed 10% of basic salary and dearance allowance. And in case of central government employees, it cannot exceed 14% of the salary and dearance allowance. So there's a monetary limit when you're claiming a deduction. So if the employer's contribution was more than these thresholds, then that amount gets taxed. But what we've seen is generally employers restrict it and they don't get it taxed over here. 80CCD deduction for employer's contribution continues even when the employee has opted for a lower rate of tax. And that is very important. So even though I've opted for a lower rate of tax, the employee's contribution cannot be taken as a deduction, but the employer's contribution can be taken as a deduction. And that is because they want to neutralize it. So first they have taxing employer's contribution and then they're claiming that as a deduction. So net, nothing gets taxed off employer's contribution. Subject to it should be within those limits that have been prescribed. There was a change in the Finance Act 2020 and we'll come to that change a little later for employer's contribution to NPS account. Now annual accretion to NPS account. Annual accretion to NPS account is not taxable because it keeps on accumulating in that account itself. There are restrictions on withdrawals and it can be withdrawn only on maturity. So the annual accretion is not taxable. However, the Finance Act has made certain change to this annual accretion, which we'll discuss a little later. And that is something which we need to look at now. We look at the withdrawal of during the life of the fund itself. So when I withdraw, partial withdrawal which is done, it is taxable. If an individual withdraws, it is taxable. But if an employee withdraws from its employee account, then to the extent of 25% of the employee's contribution, it is not taxable. Now, this partial withdrawal taxation, I think, is not intended to be in that manner, because even when the individual withdraws, there are conditions when the withdrawal happens. There's an emergency for which the withdrawal is happening. And therefore, to the extent of his contribution, at least to the extent of 25% of the contribution, it should be at par with the employees. But the section reads the word employee as compared to individual. And therefore, this risk is there. Now, when I withdraw on maturity at retirement age, 60% is withdrawal. You can withdraw it and it's not taxable. Specific section has been provided, section 10(12)(a) into bracket 12(a), which clearly says that 60% of the amount which is paid is not taxable. And 40% is compulsory to be taken as an annuity policy, which again is not taxable. So 100% on withdrawal is not taxable. And therefore, we can also say that this actually is very similar to an EEE scheme, which is exempt scheme. To say when I'm making a contribution, it is tax deductible. The annual accretion to it is not taxable, subject to, of course, the employer contribution, which we'll discuss a little later. And on withdrawal, it is not taxable. However, the annuity, what I receive post buying of the annuity policy, that is the annuity which I receive till my lifelong or depending on which scheme I've taken, that annuity is taxable. And that is something which I think the government should look at, to say that should the annuity be taxable? I'm contributing out of out of my NPS account. There's a cost which is there, and there are different types of annuity policies. Mono did mention about it to say that there are different types of annuity policies. Every person should look at what sort of annuity policy should be taken. But presently, whatever type of annuity policy is taken, the annuity is received will be fully taxable. Now, contribution tier 2 account. Tier 2 account is basically like another mutual fund. It's as good as I'm investing in mutual funds. I'm investing in a tier 2 account of an NPS, which is again with a fund manager. Depending on what sort of allocations I am making, I'm making this contribution. A tier 2 account, benefit of the tier 2 account, my cost is very low, extremely low. If I were to buy mutual funds today, my cost is going to be high. If I'm going to buy a tier 2, I'm going to invest in tier 2 accounts of the NPS. My cost is very low. So therefore, I get immediate benefit for it. For central government employees, they have also said that if they satisfy certain conditions of holding that tier 2 account for 3 years, they can claim this as a deduction under 80C within the overall limit of 1,50,000. But they have given this benefit to central government employees. Central government employees, if they have a tier 2 account, can get a tax benefit for it. Basically, I think an NPS has a lot of benefit to say that I can actually choose a government securities. So whether I put in a PPF, which is with a bank where my interest is fixed, I can actually choose a scheme depending on the allocation that I want to do, whether it's aggressive, conservative, or I can choose only government securities and still my return is around 10%, which is very high. So therefore, I think an NPS account, a tier 2 NPS account would become more beneficial than as compared to a normal mutual fund account. But of course, it is subject to market risk and it has to be evaluated. Now we come to the changes in the Finance Act 2020. So we always had this concept of employer's contribution, should it be taxable or not? So if an employer's contribution to a recognized provident fund is not taxable, subject to it being restricted 12% of the salary plus DA. Anything over and above 12% was always taxable as per fourth schedule, part A. So employer's contribution used to be taxable, but subject to limits. And generally, most of the employer's contribution were within those limits, so there were no taxation happening. Employer's contribution to superannuation fund was taxable if it exceeded 50,000 rupees. So there was this 1,50,000 benefit which was given when it was a case of employer's contribution to superannuation fund. And then you had employer's contribution to NPS, which was anyway taxable as salary, but you got a deduction under 80CCD. Now the Finance Act said they have changed 17.2, which is the definition of perquisite. Salary remains the same. Definition of perquisite, they have now said that what was earlier clause 7, which said only spoke about superannuation fund to the extent of 1,50,000 rupees. Now they have amended that to say employer's contribution to recognized provident fund, to NPS account, to superannuation, approved superannuation fund, to the extent it exceeds 7,50,000 in a previous year will be taxable. And this change has happened from the current financial year. It is effective from the financial year 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. And for the assessment year 2021-22. So this is already into effect for the current financial year. Any employer's contribution in excess of these amounts, 7,50,000 rupees, will be taxable. So all employer's contribution has to be aggregated. If it exceeds 7,50,000, it will be taxable. So now I'm actually being taxed for employer's contribution as salary to NPS account under 17.1. And now that amount is also added over here. And if it exceeds 7,50,000, it will be again taxed. So of course, we can argue that there is double taxation, or it may not be double taxation if I come within that limit. But there is taxation which has to be looked at for employer's contribution. The second change which they have done is that annual accretion, they use a word by way of interest, dividend, or any other amount of similar nature during the previous year to the balance at the credit of the fund, which relates to this employer's contribution, which is in excess of 7,50,000. So now any of those employer's contribution, which is in excess of 7,50,000, the annual accretion to that amount on that excess amount will become taxable also. And they're going to prescribe rules on how this computation is to be made. We are awaiting the rules because it's applicable from the current year itself. Now, if you look at one argument could be that there's no interest or dividend which is paid on NPS account. It is a fund, you earn income. So therefore, it should not, the annual accretion should not get covered. But then they also use any amount of similar nature. So we'll have to wait and see what the rule specifies. What is the hierarchy which the rule specifies? Annual accretion will go first towards taxation and which will go last. Whether it will be superannuation fund which will go first, or whether it's going to be NPS, or whether it's going to be recognized provident fund. So we'll have to wait and see what the rule says. Since this is applicable for the current year, the income in excess of 7,50,000 going to be taxed in the current year. We expect the rules to come out by March of 2021. Some COVID reliefs. This was their temporary measures which were taken by government to say that the employer's contribution was reduced from 12 to 10% on monthly pay, and this was for first 3 months. Non-refundable advance to EPF members. Now this was an advance which was given. Now whether you can say that this is taxable or not, our view it should not be taxable because it's only an advance and not a closure of an account. So, but government has not given any clarifications on it, and advance have been taken from EPF account without withholding tax. Partial withdrawal to fulfill financial needs. PFRD has allowed this partial withdrawals for COVID situations. Like we mentioned earlier, if it's an employee who has withdrawn this, then it should not be taxable to the extent of 25% of the total contribution made by the employee to the account. But if it's an individual who has withdrawn, then it could be fully taxable. Because of the pandemic and because we could not make investments in the last few days of March 2020, the government has actually extended timeline for making investments. So I could make investments in PPF, PF, including insurance and NPS For the financial year 1920, time was provided till 31st of July 20. So for the year ended March 20, I could make investments up to July 20. And I could have claimed a deduction in the earlier period itself. So it's a benefit. I've made investments. Generally, investments have to be made by 31st March of 20 to claim deduction for that year. Here, they've given us extended months period for it. Extension of timeline for filing the return of income for individuals. This timeline has now got extended till 15th of January. This is as of earlier date, November, but that has now got extended till 15th January for individuals. And corporates, it's, 10th January for individuals and 15th February for corporates to file their return of income. So that is all for us. If you have any queries on tax, we would be happy to take it. Over to you, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you. I will start the series of questions which we have. Let me start bottom up. Suppose an NPS subscriber died after 6 months of his or her retirement. In such case, is the nominee entitled to get the pension or the rest of the corpus deposited as annuity scheme will be given to the nominee? If yes, then what percentage?
I believe this is a question related to post-retirement death, I believe.
Right. Post-retirement.
Yes. So it all depends on the kind of annuity that person has chosen. There is a list of annuities and types of annuities. Actually, there is one kind of annuity where after the actual annuitant dies, the spouse also will get same amount of annuity. And after the death of the spouse, the entire corpus will go back to the nominee or the legal heir. So if that kind of annuity is chosen, obviously the equivalent amount of annuity which the original person was getting, pensioner was getting, that will be given to the spouse. There will be no such distinction between the original annuitant and the next annuitant. But there are annuities where it is only single life annuity. We call it single life annuity, where the annuitant only gets the annuity, and post the death of the annuitant, the entire corpus will go back to the spouse. In that case, obviously the spouse will not get the annuity, but the entire corpus with which that annuity was purchased will come back to the spouse. So it all depends on the type of annuity which is chosen.
Next question from Srinivasan Selvarajan. Should the government regulate the relatively deepened market for ensuring employees are getting better pension even under defined annuity plans than trying to keep moving risks to employees? And another question from him is, with cost of living going up, with inflation and commodity prices rising, is it opportune now to have measures reducing take-home pay of employees? I believe this is related to the new regulations.
Yeah, so the second part maybe Suranjan had touched upon about the new labor code and all that. The first part I'll try to answer. Mr. Ghosh, can you read it out? Should the government
regulate the relatively deepened market for ensuring employees are getting better pension, even under defined annuity plans?
Defined annuity plans, then trying to keep. Maybe I think it is not defined annuity plans. I believe it is defined pension.
Defined contribution
benefit.
plans.
Defined benefit pension schemes. Yeah, so I believe that was discussed at length, and Suranjan also told, and I can also add to that, is that defined pension schemes were there, obviously, at one point of time, and from January 2004, government has withdrawn it simply because there was no funding concept. Nobody was funding that scheme. No contribution was coming from anybody. And post-retirement, a net replacement ratio of 50% was given. So if my post-retirement salary is last drawn salary is 80,000, I will continue to get 40,000 without contributing anything to the fund. So actually the discussion started in late 90s, and it was thought that maintaining this kind of scheme is not financially possible. So after a lot of deliberation, it was changed to this defined contribution scheme that we see today. The NPS also is a defined contribution scheme. And it is not only for government of India. If you look at all the other corporates, big corporates, because I come from insurance sector, we have seen the big corporates, especially the MNCs, at one point of time, they were giving defined benefit schemes. But slowly all those schemes are mostly withdrawn. I don't know, Suranjan will be able to tell better whether any such defined benefit schemes are still in vogue and they are still running. So Suranjan can add.
Yeah, sure. So I think, sir, you've hit the nail on the head, right? So these plans, I think, are no longer really sustainable. I think the only defined benefit, I mean, even though, especially like in the UK, because there was a strong legacy of defined benefit plans, there are very few which are still open to new members, right? So they are these legacy plans, and very actively employers are looking at how they can de-risk them. So when I say de-risk, it means placing the risk with, let's say, an insurance company or a third party, and paying the premium for that risk transfer. The only DB plan that comes to mind is, social security plans. So, for example, we in India still have a DB plan, though we don't tend to focus on it. It is the EPS. Right, so that is, but however, because these are social security plans, they usually have caps in place. So, like, we have a cap on our EPS in terms of what you can get as pension. Similarly, in the UK, you have the basic state pension. So these are social security plans, but they don't add that much to net replacement ratios. When we talk about the corporate sector. So agree with you, sir. I think these are not sustainable. The only ones we see which are still out there are to a minimum sort of subsistence level, which can be called pure DB still, but with caps applied.
And just one thing I wanted to add is that it is not only specific to government. Everywhere it is being withdrawn. Even private sector, big MNCs also, they have withdrawn because it is not sustainable over a period of time. And with the longevity risk going up, people are living longer and longer. They really don't know how long they have to really pay that pension for. So that's right.
Right, sir. Next question is, I mean, you have recently announced a digital exit route.
Mr. Ghosh, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly, I think there was a second part of that question.
Second part.
If there's a minute, I'll just quickly spend 1 minute on that.
Cost of living going up with inflation and commodity prices rising, is it opportune now to have measures reducing take-home pay of employees, which is what has been announced in the new Okay, that is the question.
Yeah, so sorry, I'll just quickly pick that up. So I think the intention, at least of the government when these codes were announced or being drafted, was never to reduce the take-home pay of any individual. I think this was to bring more and more people under the ambit of some formal code. So, for example, the unorganized sector, or when you talk about factory staff or people employees of the gig economy. The idea was to include more people within the social security framework. The idea was never to reduce the take-home pay. The fact that take-home pay may reduce is just a functionality of the way compensation is structured in the private sector today, which is this whole idea of this CTC that your total cost to company is going to be 100, which will include your gratuity accrual, your employer PF, your employee PF, etc., etc. So that is something that is come about in the private sector. But having said that, the government's intention was never to actually reduce take-home pay, and that's one of the areas where we would encourage private sector, compensation and benefits or HR community in that leadership space to come forward and actually think about how they can manage it, right? So not reduce take-home pay, but at least share some of that, contribution towards retirals and things like that. So I think to answer your question, long story short, the intent of the code was never to do to have any adverse impact on an individual, but it's the kind of the nature of the overall compensation structures in India that may well lead to that reduction in take-home pay.
Next
Mr.
question
Ghosh,
is,
back to you. Yeah.
right. Next question is, recently PFRD has announced a digital exit route. What is the minimum lock-in period to get avail of the digital exit route?
See, the scheme remains same, that exit, if you want a premature exit, you have to stay with us for minimum 10 years. Without that, nobody can exit a NPS scheme. And there also, as it was shown in the presentation, only 20% is given upfront as lump sum and 80% is compulsorily annuitized. That is the scheme. But the period of your stay has nothing to do with the digital exit. Digital exit is another mode where you don't have to give your physical documents. You can online submit all those things and get your exit in a very, very seamless manner and smooth manner. But premature exit is only after 10 years, not before that.
Okay, sir. Now is from Bharat Prasad Naik. I have withdrawn 35% in cash and balance into annuity during the current year. I know that withdrawal of up to 60% is tax-free. How this amount will be shown in the ITR returns and under which heads of income? Please advise.
So I believe Madam Behroz is the best person here to guide in this specific matter.
So for disclosure and the return of income, there's one schedule of EI, exempt income. In the EI schedule of exempt income, you can write there as others and show this out over there. You can disclose that. And the section for exemption is section 10 into bracket 12A. So in the ITR, you can show it an exempt income schedule.
Another question related to tax, ma'am. Is there any TDS on emergency or partial withdrawal?
There are no TDS provisions.
No, there are no TDS provisions.
The employee or individual will have to offer that in his return of income and pay tax as advance tax. So if it is taxable, whatever partial withdrawal is taxable, the individual or the employee will have to offer that as his income and have to pay advance tax on that.
Next question is how NPS is more beneficial than PPF taking into account the risk factor. Is such a comparison between two social security schemes really possible?
Yeah, some comparison can be done looking at the income tax benefits of the two schemes, the kind of returns that we give under two schemes. Yes, people may say that NPS is little more risky because it is open to market ups and downs. But today, if you look at all government small saving schemes, almost every quarter, government is reviewing the rates, and I believe the only one direction the rates are going is downwards. So latest, I believe the PPF rates are, I think, around 7.1%. Am I correct? 7.1%. And if you look at NPS also, NPS rates of returns are much higher. And as Madam has already told, technically it is also a triple kind of a scheme. So if you get a return advantage of 3%, yes, again I say it is market linked. We can see ups and downs, but we are talking about a track record of say maybe last 10 years, 12 years. It's not a small track record that we are talking about. So technically now the situation is such that we are giving little better than PPF. So one has to take a call. One has to take a call And if one is a little risk averse, my suggestion will be in any case PPF you cannot contribute more than 1.5 lakh in a year. You exhaust your contribution there. If you under ATC, obviously, if you are claiming only under PPF, and then balance 50,000 rupees, you can claim under NPS, which is an exclusive tax benefit given for NPS. And then you yourself start comparing the rates of return. You will find out for yourself which is better.
Yeah, and sir, if I may add, I think like you mentioned, I think these are slightly different investment. The risk profile is slightly different. So I would encourage people to use both avenues. Whereas on PPF you may have sort of a book value approach. That you have that
Yes.
the risk is that the interest rates will come down, and therefore the returns will be lower. But on the NPS side, you have the ability, based on your own risk appetite, to create your own portfolio. So I think you mentioned that, and that will be mark to market. So, as someone who believes people should do more for retirement, I would encourage people to make use of all avenues available.
Absolutely.
What are the benefits of Tier 2 account in NPS?
Tier 2, the biggest advantage is that it is withdrawable account. Unless you have exhausted the entire 50,000 there, obviously there is a point in putting entire 50,000 in Tier 1, get your tax benefit. And if you have extra money, you can put in Tier 2 and you can withdraw it at any point of time you like. You need not withdraw the entire amount. You can liquidate some of your units, leave the balance here, and then again contribute and carry on with this. And another advantage is that why we are giving it, actually it is a big, it has got a big advantage over your savings account. Currently savings account are giving a pittance. Against that Tier 2 accounts, whether it is a fully invested in government securities or partially in equity and government securities, this is also giving close to 10% kind of a return. So why miss out on this additional return that you are getting? But yes, in Tier 2, obviously on the investment you are not getting any tax benefit, which is reserved only for the Tier 2. And at the end of the when you are retiring at the age of 60 or at the point of superannuation, if you have both the accounts running, Tier 1 and Tier 2, there is every possibility that you can merge both the accounts and create a bigger pension corpus, if you wish that. That possibility is also there. So Tier 2 basically gives you a lot of flexibility with a much better rate of return. And it can be redeemed at any point of time. Today you give the redemption request, maybe within 2 days you will get it back. It just works like your savings bank account.
Now, a lot of questions. Sir, I did not go for any pension account during last 25 years of services. Approximately, I have saved around 8 to 10 lakhs to one PF or stroke one pension policy. You can assume I'm approximately saving around 3K per month. With the age of 50 years, what is the best option I can try from 2021 till 2051 for my pension stability? I'm looking at around 40K per month as pension by 2031. I mean, we're seeking your advice on what is the best scheme possible.
Sir, I'm very sorry to say I do not want to discourage you, but you are singularly prepared for 40,000 K of pension per month, unless you start investing a huge amount. And there are so many factors which we cannot predict sitting here. Like 2031 is almost 10 years ahead. What will be the annuity rates? Currently, the annuity rates where you invest and ultimately the corpus comes back to the nominee, there the rates are anything between 5.5% to 6%. So for getting, say, close to 40,000 rupees a month, which is 4,80,000, so you need a huge corpus at 6%. 16 times of that, so maybe close to 80 lakhs. Suranjan, you are much better than me in this kind of calculations. You can tell me if I am right.
I did get the calculator out. Yeah, roughly 80 lakhs, sir. I think that's pretty much.
Roughly 80 lakhs you require at today's annuity rates. So, sir, you can just imagine what is the gap. You are at 10 lakh, you have to reach 80 lakh. So there is a gap of 70 lakh, and you have to make out this gap in, say, 10 years' time. So almost whatever you have accumulated over this period, every year you have to put in this kind of money. Then only you can reach there. Provided, and that's a very big disclaimer, that the annuity rates still remain around 6% at that point of time, which I don't think will be there. Because the way the interest rates are going down in the market, I believe it will be much closer to 3.5%, 4% rather than 5.5%, 6% what we see. Suranjan can give you a better feel.
No, sir, absolutely. I think based on what we've seen in the recent couple of years, they are coming down, and insurance companies are pricing more risk into those annuities because, like you said, I think
Yes.
people are living longer, interest rates are coming down, so that's a pretty big risk that they're writing. So nothing at this stage suggests that the rates will increase. So this is kind of a best case scenario that, the number that I think sir mentioned of about 80 lakhs in 10 years time, that's kind of a best case scenario. So yeah, unfortunately, I think you'll probably need to significantly increase your monthly saving from 3,000 to what I would calculate as at least 40,000, maybe even more, to be able to get to that corpus in 10 years time.
Is there any limit on Tier 2?
No limit means if it is a contribution limit, absolutely there is no limit. Neither there is any limit on contribution in Tier 1, nor there any limit in Tier 2. But only thing is that the limit is your sort of known sources of income. If I want to put some money which is beyond known sources of income, obviously we all know what can happen.
Would tax benefit be increased in this year's budget expected?
That is always there in our wish list. So this year also we have given such a proposal, but finally we'll come to know. Just 4 days wait.
Thank you. The last question is, this is, I think this has been answered by in your presentation, how the NPS is different from the earlier pension system. What are the new features which are not there in earlier system?
Earlier system is this defined benefit scheme?
I think so. He's meaning that only.
No, if there is a defined benefit scheme, and if it is a government defined benefit scheme, as I said, there is no funding concept. So obviously from government revenue, those things were paid out. We call it pay as you go kind of scheme. When people retire, they start drawing their pension. But here there is a definite contribution and accumulation phase. During that, the amount is accumulated. If you wish, you can contribute little more from your side and try to see that. Just the other gentleman asked that if I want 40,000 rupees per month as pension, what we need to invest today. So similarly, if you are planning for some kind of, if you have something in mind that I need 40,000 or 50,000 rupees per month, so what kind of amount I need to save? So there you can contribute according to your wish and generate a corpus. But only thing is that when something is there in your mind that I want 40 or 50,000, please take into account the fact that unless government changes the taxation provisions, there will be tax on annuity. So at 40,000, 50,000, maybe you will be attracting anything between 20 to 30% rate of tax at the current rates, if you have some other sources of income also. So that will again take out a part of the pension income. That also one has to plan for.
That is all for the day, sir. From last evening, program onwards, the question and answers are getting much more deepened. It shows that people are taking more interest in this. That's all.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Mr. Ghosh, and all your other colleagues from ICC for arranging these kind of sessions. And I believe it will go really a long way. The kind of questions we are getting, people are thinking more. And whatever Suranjan is also telling that their new surveys are pointing out that more corporates, more number of employees are thinking about their retirement benefits. Whether it is NPS or some other thing, that is immaterial. The material fact is that people are thinking about their retirement. People are thinking about a dignified life beyond retirement. That is what is important. So,
Right.
Thank you all. Thank you, Suranjan. Thank you, Madam Tandir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your
Thank you.
presentations. Thank you.